Hey, how's it going everybody? Welcome back to Aussie Fish Keeping. So in today's video, we're going to be talking all about guppies. Now, in particular, we're going to be going over a full care guide and breeding guide. But without any further ado, let's just jump straight into today's video. So obviously, guppies are a super popular aquarium fish in the hobby. So not only are they a super beautiful fish, but they also are a super robust and hardy fish, making them super easy to breed and care for. So guppies, also known as the millionfish, generally originate in many islands and countries within South America, where a lot of the times they are found in freshwater systems along with brackish water, estuaries and mangroves. So because of how easy these guys actually are, a lot of the time they are recommended for beginners, but in my opinion they are a perfect, colourful little fish that can suit any setup and any experience level. So one of the first things you do need to maintain if you are planning on keeping these guys is the correct water parameters. So due to these guys originating in waterways with a salt content, it is generally best to keep them with a higher pH of around 7 to 8. But if you are using tap water, obviously that is quite easily achievable and it shouldn't be too much of a struggle at all. Other than that, they aren't really too fussy when it comes to temperature. You can keep them in an unheated aquarium or a heated aquarium. You can even keep them outside in ponds, or you can, keep them inside in a fish tank. So temperature is definitely something you don't really need to worry about when keeping these guys. Obviously, if you do live in like Antarctica or something, you're gonna want to have a heater in your tank just because, well, for obvious reasons, I guess. So if you do live in a colder climate, it's probably best to keep them with a heater. But here in Australia and in the States, it's generally not needed for a heater whatsoever. Now, as long as your water is relatively clean, and what I mean by that is that it's not too cloudy and it's not very stagnant, then you should have complete success with keeping these guys. Now, the reason you don't want this really dirty or stagnant water is because a lot of the time that can cause your guppies to develop fin rot, which can be really detrimental to your guppy just because they do rely a lot on those big fins to get around. So having fin rot just isn't healthy for them whatsoever. But yeah, water parameters are definitely something you have to keep in mind if you are planning on getting these guys. So as for the diet for these guys, guppies are generally quite versatile fish and they aren't too picky when it comes to what food you feed them. As long as you're giving them a varied diet which provides them with plenty of nutrients, you should find your guppies do perfectly fine. So I would generally recommend trying to feed them things like live baby brine shrimp, mosquito larvae, frozen food, or a high quality dry food. But as long as you do give them a mix of different foods and all of which are very healthy for them, then you should find your guppies thrive under your care. So tank size is another thing you do need to take into account when you are planning on caring for these guys. Guppies don't actually get that large, and generally males only get around 2.5 to 3 centimeters in length, whereas the females can actually reach around 3 to 6 centimeters in length. So they still aren't by any means a massive fish, which does mean you can keep them in a smaller sized aquarium quite easily. So I would say if you are planning on keeping these guys, I would recommend keeping them in a tank with a minimum of 18 litres. So these tanks here behind me are 20 litres and you do just get them from Kmart here in Australia. I think they're about $40 and they just make the perfect tank for guppies. Now you do need to remember, if you are trying to keep these guys in a smaller tank, they can get quite stressed out, which can lead them to jump out. So I would just recommend keeping them in something at least 18 to 20 litres. But yeah, as long as you have a suitable sized tank, you should have no problems with your guppies jumping out at all. Now, the next thing you do need to remember if you are going to keep these guys is that they can be prone to all sorts of genetic mutations. The reason for this is because that these guys have just been constantly line bred just to get certain strains. And a lot of the time, this can cause genetic mutations. So to minimize the risk of buying unhealthy fish, I would recommend just trying to get fish from a local high quality breeder who breeds high quality fish that are healthy. And this is just going to minimize the risk of your fish just dying randomly or not being able to give birth properly. But yeah, as long as you are buying healthy guppies, you shouldn't have a problem with this at all. So that was just a quick overview of a care guide for these guys, and now we'll just jump straight into the breeding of guppies. So obviously guppies are a live bearing fish, which does mean they give birth to live young. So when these live young are born, they can be super fragile and vulnerable just because of how small they are. So they can be eaten quite easily by other fish in the tank or by the guppies themselves. Okay, so if you are planning on breeding these guys, the first thing you do need to remember is having a correct male to female ratio in your aquarium. Now what this means is that for every male you add, you need to add 2 females. So if you do just want to have a pair of guppies, that should be fine. If you plan on having more than 1 male, you do need to make sure there's more females than males in that aquarium. So a general rule of thumb is that for every extra male you add, you want to add 2 females. Now this is because the males can be quite aggressive when they're trying to breed, and they can beat up the females quite a bit. So having a lot of females in there just equals out the aggression and makes sure that the aggression isn't just focused on one single female. Now another thing you do need to take into account when you are breeding these guys is you want to make sure you condition them. Obviously conditioning them isn't vital, but if you want to have the most amount of fry you possibly can, then conditioning is quite important. So to condition your fish, you want to feed them really high quality, high protein food. And this is just going to help them get ready for breeding and help them develop the fry. So things I would recommend is live food, so stuff like live baby brine shrimp, live black worms, or mosquito larvae is generally best. You can get away with feeding them frozen food and dry food, but I would recommend the live food. It really does just get them into the breeding mood. Plus, if they do notice that there is like live baby brine shrimp and stuff for their fry to eat, it does make them want to breed a little bit more because they know their fry will be able to grow. Now once you have your parents ready to breed and they have bred, you do need to make sure there's plenty of space for your fry to hide in the aquarium. So like I mentioned before, they can be really fragile and delicate when they are first born. So having lots of plant life and little nooks and crannies for them to hide in and get away from other fish is generally best. So I would recommend using plants, and you can see in these tanks behind me, I have really bushy plants in case my guppies do give birth. So things like Java moss, hornwort, foxtail is generally recommended, but any sort of aquarium plant should do, as long as there is space for your fry to get away and isolate themselves from the rest of the fish. And the final thing, obviously, is rearing the fry correctly. So if you want your fry to grow fast, I would recommend using some sort of instant baby brine shrimp or live baby brine shrimp. But if you don't have access to that, you can quite easily just crush up little flake food and sprinkle that in the aquarium. And your guppies will grow slowly but surely off that. And then once your guppies do get big enough, you do want to separate them out into some sort of tub or container, just because your aquarium will get overcrowded quite easily and you just don't want that. With that being said, that is going to bring us to the end of today's video, so I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope I helped you guys learn a thing or two about caring for and breeding guppies. If you did enjoy today's video and you haven't done so already, please make sure to go down and subscribe, and while you're down there, smash the like button and comment your thoughts on today's video. I always love going down there and reading them all, and I try to reply back to as many comments as I can. But yeah, with that being said, I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you all so much for sticking around to the end, and I'll see you all in that next video.